to stabilize them. I'm going to start with that kettlebell, holding it bottom up. I'm going to bring it to the hip of my leg that's kneeling down. And from there, I'm coming across my body, around my head and to the front, okay? So that bell is going to orbit around my head and back down to my hip.
My name is Gabby Callagy, formerly Gabby Callagy, and my name recently changed. I am a physical therapist and personal trainer, and I own and operate the Run RX in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is a concierge physical therapy and performance training for runners and just the modern athlete, which we think of as just weekend warriors and anybody looking to really take care of their body and sustain fitness long term.
I love a good pitch. Golly, I like, as a marketing person, I really do get excited because I work with so many people that are like, well, I don't know. Everyone knows what I do. I'm like, no, they really don't. So when someone can pitch their company so well, it makes me so happy. So bravo to you. And I go,
Thank you.
And keywords that you use, like the concierge, where I'm like, oh, we're going to dig right into that. But I always say, before we know about the business, we need to understand who the person is. So Gabby, please tell people, who are you? Where do you live? Who are you from childhood all the way to college?
Okay. So I am from Massachusetts, born and raised in Massachusetts. I grew up in Acton, Mass. I grew up as somebody always playing sports. Running actually wasn't my sport. My sports were soccer, basketball, and lacrosse. And then got to college, decided to go into exercise science because, the counselor at school did a good job of being like, what is it that you like? And I said, I like sports and being active. And then that's where they sent me. So I was an exercise science major.
Wait a second. You expedited that so quickly. We have time, my friend, we have time to talk. So is your family, does everyone in your family play sports? Or was it just you, the focus?
Yeah, I have two siblings and they both played sports, a variety of sports. None of us were runners. My dad actually did run marathons, and my grandfather always ran marathons. Running for enjoyment, I live in Marblehead. I go in.
Mm-hmm. The big joke in Marblehead is either you have kids, a dog, a sailboat, or you're a runner. Those are the four things. If you're not one of those four things, you're not going to really fit in this like cute little town. So, but a lot of people here started when they were in their 50s. So your grandfather started running. Was that something that he did all the time, and then your dad just kind of picked it up?
I think my dad picked it up with my grandfather. All I remember is my grandfather lived in Billerica, and my family lived in Acton, which is not super close. And I remember being young, and my grandpa would show up at the house, but his car wouldn't be there. And I'd ask, like, where is grandpa's car? And he would have run over. So I always remember being like, that's crazy. Like to think that he could do that.
Mind you, I'm sorry. As we're talking, I'm just going to have to sit and check out, like, how far is that? I mean, how many miles?
I don't know, because all I know is how to get there mostly from highways. But I don't know how far distance wise. I'm sure he went back road.
All right. I've never done this. So now I'm just curious. So Billerica to Acton?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see how the distance. Direction. Where were we before our cell phones? It's 12.8 miles.
Okay. It's not outrageous. In my head as a kid, it felt
no. But it's 12. All right, so it's 12.8 miles in the car. But if you're walking it, it's like 4 hours, 4 hours and 4 minutes. So running it, what? I mean, a 2-hour run, 2.5 hour run?
Yeah.
Holy crap, that's cool. I mean, did he do it often, or is it just a one-offs?
He ran a lot of marathons. I think it was when he was training. There was a couple of times that I remember. I was young, but he ran a lot of marathons. It became his kind of passion, and he was just like a tough guy. I mean, he literally ran a marathon within 2 years before he passed. So like he was just going right to the very end.
How old was he when he died?
Not super old. He was in his like late 70s. But he was.
Come on now. I mean, mind you, bless his heart. I mean, late 70s, running marathons. I mean, that's amazing. That is so cool. And so that became a dad Something, a father-son
Yeah,
thing?
they ran it together a lot. I remember there's pictures of us when we were kids, at specifically at Disney World, and the two of them had run the marathon. And that marathon, you're up at like the crack of dawn because they have to get it in before the parks open.
Yeah.
So there's pictures of us probably at like 4 a.m, as he's going up, like going to the start line or whatever it may be. And so yeah, so they did it a lot together. So that was, even though my dad was a hockey player and my family, no one was runners, marathons were definitely something that I was aware of, that was in my family all the time growing up.
And the three of you guys, so like I go, so you're all right, name your sports again. Lacrosse,
Basketball, and soccer. And basketball was my favorite sport. That was the sport that I initially was going to play in college freshman year. I sort of wasn't ready to give up basketball at that time. And so I chose my school based on just wanting to go play basketball. So I was going to go to a Division III school. I went. I didn't love the school. I decided I'm not going to commit. I'm not going to choose my school based on that. It's time to like hang up the shoes, and ended up transferring to UNH, giving up on basketball. Running was always something that I did as, to stay in shape outside the season, but never ran more than like 3 miles, max, on the off season. And I just kind of felt like a washed up athlete when I got to school and no longer had a sport, and fitness and exercise was now a thing that you did just for health. And I wanted to like train for something. I felt a little lost with like spending so much time enjoying strength training, enjoying exercise, because it paid off for me in a game or as a basketball player, as a soccer player. And I loved that. And it was just a little depressing to be like, okay, this is now just for general keeping myself healthy forever. So I decided to pick up running. This was my sophomore year in college. I don't think I'd run more than 4 or 5 miles max. And through a family friend, we wound up with, my mom had a bib for the Boston Marathon. And she asked me, do you want it? Someone asked. And I was like, yeah, why not? I'd seen my dad do it, my grandfather do it. I was like, yeah, let's do it. I'll have something to train for. And now as a physical therapist and a personal trainer, especially as a physical therapist, I cringe at how quickly I went.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, what was the time frame from the time that you got the bib to the time that you ran? What was that? What was it like for you? Because again, seeing it is totally different than being in it. Because I mean, same thing with me where I was telling you before we started recording, I worked in the media we were always at Hopkinton. I was Matt Siegel's producer at Kiss Runway, and Billy Costa, we would report in Hopkinton, and he's like, I'm just going to run back to Boston. And we're like, what are you talking about? And then of course, when I worked for the governor, we were always there to give the award to the male runners, and the mayor would give the award to the female runner. So what was that like for you, where, of course, I've seen it 10 zillion times, how hard it could it be? What was that from you're now training for 26.2 miles? Please tell the world about this one, because I think that's one of the things that there are the people that say, oh, how hard could it be? And then there are people that say, I would never do that.
Yeah. I think I found out in like early October probably that we had a bib. And for those who aren't aware of the timing, the marathon's in April, and most training cycles are like a 16 to 18 week training cycle. And that's for somebody who's probably already running like a base amount of mileage. And I'd say like, what the people I see, 15, 20 miles a week, maybe a good base mileage before you start running. But I was maybe running like 5 or 10. And again, never more than 5. So I think I was just naive to how hard it could be. And it was definitely something that was daunting the whole time. And I didn't have any crazy goals of like finishing with any time. I just wanted to go finish it. But yeah, I guess it was just my mentality of like, if you put the effort in and the time in, you can do it. And like you said, with running is, unlike some other sports like basketball and football or any hand-eye coordination, like some people are just blessed with, a lot of, like LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, they are blessed, and they certainly work hard, but they are a little bit blessed with some.
But I'm sorry, but neither one of them could run a marathon. I'm just gonna say it right there. There's no, they have skills, but there's no way they can go out there and run a marathon. Because I mean, Teddy Bruschi did it after he retired, and he's like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life, and I'm an athlete.
Right. Yeah. And, practice makes perfect, they say all the time, but like not always. Like some people just aren't blessed with that same coordination. But with running, it's like, yes, if you put the time in, your body will change, your physiological changes will happen, and you'll be able to do this. Like you said, is all body shapes, all ages, people, you just put the time in and you commit to it, and you can do it, which is which is why I started to really like the sport. And so yeah, I guess it was a little daunting, and I went into it a little bit afraid, but also a little naive as to just like how much time it was. I was a sophomore in college, so I actually haven't run a marathon since. And mostly because I had all the time in the world to train in college. You go to class for a couple hours, and I've yet to find the ability to be like, squeeze this into my full-time job, because it's such a massive commitment to train for these races.
I'm like you, we're very naive. Again, track, played sports, very athletic, every which way. And I heard it was like I ran for my first marathon in 2004. It was right after it was right after 9/11. And like, I go, you know what? Like a group of us at NECN decided to run together. And I got my number, ran for the Red Arbok Youth Foundation, because I always run and do charity things for kids. And I started training in January through February. For April. Because again, I did the Walk for Hunger, 20 miles. What's the big deal? Add 6 more, no big deal. Holy moly, running and walking, dramatically different things.
Oh yeah.
I never even thought about it. And my doctor at MGH said, after I was done, I made it. I was happy. He's like, do not do anything. You have fatigued your body. Do nothing for the next couple of months. And I'm like, okay. And as you know, living in New England, if it's a gorgeous day, everyone is out. So I went rollerblading. I lived in Arlington at the time, went rollerblading. And I literally went over a little stump, and my upper bone shattered into my lower bone. And I was in a cast for a year. And I was like, look at that. And I swear to God, I was never going to run a marathon ever again. Like ever. I was like, never going to run, never going to do. I was gonna I'm going to sit there and be on a bike, and that's it. Yeah. So after you were done running that first one, and you've said that you haven't run again since, what was it that made you this like, this is just not going to happen again?
No, I do want to do one again. I finished in 4 hours and 18 minutes. So it was a 9:50 pace.
Awesome.
Which, very good for your first time
that's
out.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was good. I'd never let myself come to a complete stop. I felt like an object in motion stays in motion. So I will go down to the slowest possible jog, but there was times I was like, if I stop, it's going to be hard to keep going. God, you crossed the finish line. I remember being like very happy, very excited. I did it great. And in that moment, I was like, I don't need to do that again. That was like very challenging. And again, I was not running at all. I think now I would be a totally different place running a marathon. But yeah, it's such a good example too of this story that I tell people of like just Boston on that day, and just how supportive everyone is on that day. And my dad had obviously run many marathons, and he's like, well, what do you want to do after? And I was like, I'm going to want like a cold beer. I just like want some food and like a cold beer. And he's like, you might want that, but I've had races where I wanted to just go home and lay down, and I couldn't even think of it. And I finished, and I was like, I do kind of want a cold beer, but I also feel like there's something, I just got to get something. I felt like I was going to puke. And we're waiting in line. We were waiting in line for a bar to go with my family to go get a beer. And I got my blanket around me, my bib, my medal. So clearly I just run, and we're just waiting. And they're like, are you sure you want? I was like, I just feel like if I got something up, I'd be good. And they're like, well, why don't you just go get it up? And I like stepped next to a box truck on the curb, and I just like, it all came up, and everyone in the line for the bar just started clapping like, good job, good for you. And we went in, we had a beer, and for a couple of years I didn't want to run again, but then I kept going back to Boston, and every year I go, my husband's always like, you say this every year. I'm like, I want to go run that again.
It is that moment of where I did the same thing, but I was driven by when the marathon bombing happened. It was the first year of my entire life that I was never there. I had always, my entire career, I had always been there. And when it happened, I remember that morning, it was a gorgeous morning, and I was like, everyone's calling me like, are you at the marathon? I'm like, I am home. I'm so excited. I don't have to work. I don't have to be there. I'm so jazzed. and literally in the afternoon, I got the phone call. They're like, Ann, would you run again? And I'm like, damn it, yes. So then again, ran for another charity. But it is that like the momentum of when you're here and you see it. I mean, even when I see a runner, like if I haven't see a runner, I'm like feeling guilty, like, holy crap, oh my God. What was that moment of, okay, now I'm done with the basketball. I ran a marathon, but I'm kind of done with that too. Why go into the career of being in sports? Like, why go into that career of, you could have gone to wheeling back. individuals that do sports, we think differently. I mean, there's A types in the business world, but there's like A times 20 when you're in sports, because we are so focused on not only team playing, but we will not let ourselves down. We're like, no matter what. I mean, the amounts of times that my doctor has said to me, we see so many athletes here at MGH, and no matter how many times we say, don't do it, an athlete will always do it. Because like we think differently. Why did you decide to go into the field of helping athletes? I mean, we're stubborn. You're stubborn. We're a stubborn group of people. Why this career over anything else?
Yeah. Well, going back to that counselor kind of guiding me towards one direction, I was like, as a student, I love sports. And as a student, I was the student who was like, she's very smart. She just doesn't apply herself. It was like my priority was like, all I thought about was sports and all that. And then I found exercise science and it clicked. I just got it. It was so natural. I actually did 2 years of just very general personal training outside of like the sports realm and just fitness settings. And then even as I got into PT, again, more generalist, and it's like people come in for that setting and they're like, I have to beg them to do their exercises to get better. It's like, okay, this like person with just knee pain, non-athlete. And it's like, okay, did you do your exercises? No. Are you better? No. And there was just always something about like wanting to work with a population who was like wanting to put the same time in that I was wanting to put in. I love sports.
But I have to say, like, I mean, I injured myself and I was sent to a PT, and there's like a part of us that I want to get better, but you feel when the person's not experienced enough or they're just green, you're like, I want someone that's going to push me versus there's some physical therapists who are like, well, you're only going to get better if you do the work. I'm like, well, yes, but I need you to push me and tell me when is it going to get better? So were you dealing with both of those individuals?
I dealt with, it depends. I mean, early on, as every PT or trainer should be, you're just more in a more generalist setting. You should get exposed to that. But I always, as a physical therapist, I had the history as a trainer. And so I would see the occasional athlete runner. And I just like the setting I was in, they weren't being, like you said, pushed enough. It was like these very sterile hospital-based PT settings or this like office park where like, I was like, this person's a runner. They need to be able to hop and jump and lift weights. This person's a basketball player and they're laying on a table doing leg lifts. And it's just not enough. So I loved working with the occasional like ACL tear for a basketball player or whatever, because they just like want, like I could take that training aspect of how I would work with that performance side and like roll it into what I was doing for PT, and they would just work so hard. They'd leave PT sweating. They'd be like, what should I be doing at home? They wanted to get better, especially runners. I mean, runners, there are athletes and there are runners, and runners are total. With runners, I need to like slow down. You need to do less. And usually that's usually the message I have to give versus do more. But yeah, I always was really interested. I obviously was a runner personally. I always loved the biomechanics of running and how, these injuries with runners are overuse usually. So there's a lot more kind of problem solving and mystery involved on, okay, you have this pain. How do we figure out why this is happening versus I fell and I sprained my ankle. And I always liked that aspect of it. So working with athletes, they push yourself. I get to push them harder. There's usually some measurable goal. As much as I love getting people back to like, being able to play with your kids without pain is super important. That's amazing. But they just come in, they're like, yeah, my knee hurts every day. It's like, okay, good. Your knee's better. That's great. But it's really even more exciting when they're like, okay, I can get back to running. And I went out and I ran that race and I ran it better than I've ever had. So like when it's those really measurable reports, it's really exciting to be able to see that.
Who is your best customer? Like the person that comes in and says, I needed you 3, 4, 5 years ago. Where have you been hiding? Who's that person? Because I feel like I go, those are the commercials that you're seeing right now. I'm like, where have you been all my life? I go, best juice souls or whatever. Who's the best person for you? Because the athlete comes in all shapes and sizes. I tell people all the time, they're like, I am the slowest runner ever. And I have had pregnant people pass me. I've had older people, like much older people pass me. And this one Asian man that runs every year barefoot. I've had him pass me. I love him. So who's that person that would be ideal to come to you and talk about what does your company do, and how have you defined it from a regular physical therapist or going to the doctors and seeing a sports doctor? Like, what makes you different and stand out above all other things that we've seen in the past?
Yeah. I would say, and I see runners of all levels, all shapes and sizes. I train anywhere from a runner who's an Olympic trial qualifier who just ran a 2-hour, 14-minute marathon. I work
Wait,
with
Gabby,
him.
I want to clarify. Do you just do runners?
No, I don't. I see, I would say, 80% of what I see is runners. But again, my background being in soccer and basketball, I have the occasional I see people who want to stay active. They want to be able to go to their spin class. They have a group fitness class that they go to every weekend, whether it's CrossFit or anything else. And like, that's their social world. That's what keeps them mentally healthy, physically healthy. So that's kind of what we define as like the modern athlete. You don't really have to be a runner. You don't have to be on a team, but you're a person who likes to go play ultimate frisbee on the weekends, and all your friends play ultimate frisbee, and an injury has kept you from doing it. Or you like to run with your run club, and that's your group of friends. And you are, maybe I'm 45 now, 50. I'm starting to have more aches and pains than I was before, but I want to continue running long into my life. And this is important to me. So I'm here preventatively. So what our clinic does, which is different, is, and I worked in the hospital and just like general outpatient world for a while, is we are an out of network practice, so we don't directly bill insurance. We do one-on-one concierge level physical therapy, performance physical therapy, as we would call it, because again, my runners, they're taking 3.5 times their body weight with every step that they land. So if on their last day of PT, they're doing clamshells on a table, that's just not loading you enough. You're gonna go back and get hurt.
Can you tell me what a clamshell? What is that? I've never heard before.
It's like the Jane Fonda style, lay on your side, open up your knee, just like
sure, it goes like this.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, almost,
like
what
a
are you talking about?
Yeah. So, that's just not enough. I mean, if you're running, again, you're accepting 3.5 times your body weight every step you take, or if you go do CrossFit, or if you like to, play in a adult softball league. I mean, your body just goes through more than what in that PT setting we were loading them with. So I felt like there was an incomplete rehab process happening with especially the athletes and the runners I was seeing, where they were better enough to get through their day-to-day life, which is really all insurance wants to pay for. Insurance says, can you bathe? Can you eat? Can you go to work? Can you take care of yourself? Good. That's all you need. That's your activities of daily living. We're not covering anymore. And so, if my runner is pretty much pain-free, but having pain with running, and they're squatting 100 pounds on a barbell, that insurance companies probably say they're done. We're not covering this, and we're not paying for it. So I watched a lot of athletes just either not get enough rehab because we were told like, okay, this isn't covered by insurance anymore, or, get told like, all right, these last 3 visits aren't being paid for because you're fine. You can get through your life. And the very first runner I ever treated, actually, like serious runner I ever treated, I'll never forget, because he came in and he said he was very upset. He'd been like on and off trying to run for 2-3 years. And he gave me a book called Spark, which is about the effects of exercise on the brain and how it helps with just mental performance and anxiety and depression. And he said, for the first time in my life, I'm checking off anxiety and depression on my medical history because I haven't been able to exercise. So like, his insurance was telling him, you can't get this PT anymore. You don't need it. And he's feeling like he can't participate in things with his friends and his run club. Mentally, he's not in a good place. Physically, his blood pressure's up. And it was just very frustrating to have those restrictions put on the treatment we were giving these people.
But what happens now? I mean, we all hear the stories about the insurance. I mean, the insurance companies are a barrier to so much. I mean, this is why we have Jeff Bezos out there, like insurance companies. We have Elon Musk. I mean, everyone that has billions of dollars, they're trying to figure out, how do we sit there and make medicine better? How do we sit there and get medical care better? A lot of doctors are private practices. We'll do the door to door. You pay us directly. We'll come to your home. Everyone realizes there's something extremely broken with our system. People overseas comes over here, they're like, there's something so wrong with the US system. How does one do their job to keep people healthy? Because again, we all know it's a connection. Physically, if you're physically happy, mentally you're happy as well.
Yeah.
So how does one even do their job knowing that there's all these different barriers out there for people?
Yeah, it's hard. That's kind of what led me to opening my business. That was the big driving factor was even if insurance isn't saying, no, you can't come back, you know, the settings that you're in, I would be seeing 2 patients at a time for 40 minutes. I wouldn't have sufficient time to really help people. It was like, okay, you go do that while I watch this person. And they weren't getting good one-on-one care. So the big reason that myself and a lot of other practitioners have stepped out of the insurance side of things and the into the out of network side of things is because I get to see my patients one-on-one for 50 minutes. I get to not only just rush through exercises, all the exercises I can, I get to hear them, educate them so they have the tools to sustain things long term. And it's frustrating. I actually had this conversation with a patient today that, you know, and she was saying, you know what, like I've shifted total gears to like I consume mental health through out of network benefits. I just pay out of pocket. I consume this, what I'm doing with you through out of network, because she's like, you know what, I'm getting better care and I'm getting better than I've ever had before. And she was like, first of all, there's a flawed system that we have to do that people have to go pay out of pocket. You know, the problem is that insurance companies don't reimburse a lot to these PT clinics. So PT clinics have to put tons of people in.
But they're reimbursing
one time.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but they're reimbursing for you to go to the gym. So can we not use can't people use the same funds for you than that they would use if I was going to the gym?
You would think, yeah, like some of these insurances will offer like, hey, we give you $200 a month to go get a gym membership. They actually can usually use that for what I do. And my patients and clients can use HSA, FSA dollars to come in and utilize our services. But yeah, it's an unfortunate evil that like to really get this good care, you have to step out of the out of network, because I agree our country is so flawed with how we deliver healthcare. So the fact that I even have to do that to, you know, you're going to come here and yes, this is the amount you're going to pay. The nice thing is that there's no surprises. I've had a lot of people think like, oh, I only pay a copay. I pay $20 and then 8 visits in, they get all the backlog bills of like, actually, no, we weren't covering this. And they're like paying $350 a visit. And at least you know what you're paying. My hope is we get people better faster. Like I said, when I was seeing people in a busy clinic, all I had time was like, all right, I have this much time. We need to do these exercises. And I find what I've done differently in my practice now is I can sometimes spend 20 to 30 minutes of our session just like talking through a problem, talking through this. Can I run? Should I run? And empowering the patient to understand what's going on and why, and that they're having now tools. Not only are we getting better faster, but they have tools to stay better faster. So yeah, it's unfortunately this necessary evil that, you know, I think a lot of people have realized like I'm going to make sure that I get good care. My fitness, my mental health is important to me. My ability to run is too important to me not to mess around and see somebody who doesn't have, this is my specialty. We see runners, we know runners, we know the way their minds work, we know the way what their bodies need. And so, you know, if you're a runner who is dealing with chronic nagging injuries and you're not getting better, our goal is to be that end point of like, let's stop it here. Let's make sure that you stay better. We also have the training side of things. So a lot of my injured runners will become training clients. So they're doing the preventative stuff so they don't land back on a treatment table injured. And just the healthcare world is very reactive instead of proactive. And we're trying to be more proactive, bridge that gap of I'm injured and now I'm healthy, but I want to stay healthy and be able to offer that really good one-on-one care for, you know, a lot of things in this world are becoming more and more niche, and running is a very big population. It's a very big niche,
especially in Massachusetts. I mean,
right.
I'd have to say anywhere that there's a marathon. I mean, so clearly New York, Boston, and Chicago are the big ones. So they're the Abbott. So everyone's like really focused on those. Not that they don't have it in other places, Disney, etc. They're everywhere, but it's the community that's large, and also it's easy. You throw on a pair of sneakers, good pair of sneakers, and then you just go. Unlike other sports, so it is one of those things where people are very, very focused on running because I can go on a business trip, throw my sneakers in my bag, and I know I can go for a run.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's like one of the most easily accessible sports there is. And it's accessed by so many people, so many ages, so many body shapes. And it's a great way to stay in shape and it's a great way to stay mentally healthy. So, um, if that is something that's that important to you, then I tell people like, don't go see the Joe Schmo at the neighborhood. If your choice of a physical therapist is who's the cheapest and who's the closest, then
Yeah.
that might turn out okay. But if you're dealing with like, I'm dealing with this still, I'm having this pain, I've had it for years, I've gone to PT, it's not getting better. Like,
Yeah.
you need to see somebody who knows you and what you want to be doing. And
Mhm.
so we really try to, get down to the nitty gritty of what runners need short term and long term.
Let's add to this conversation in regards to a lot of parents are getting their kids in sports. I mean, school's starting soon. A lot of college kids are already in school down south. They're definitely in school. Up north, they're starting school in a couple of weeks. Sports, they're all like, you go, there's nowhere you can drive by that you're seeing the kids on the field.
Yeah.
What should parents be aware of? Because they're like, I was in sports. I go, oh my God, I don't do sports anymore because my body's wear and tear. Because they always blame the body's wear and tear. But then they have their kids going to sports and the kids are going hard and fast. One of my girlfriends, her son just went from, he's a downhill skier, amazing in every single way, plays lacrosse, and now just started to football. And this coach is like on them, like riding them hard, which is good and bad at the same time.
Yeah.
What should parents be aware of where I want my kids to play sports, but I need them to have the longevity because I know my body can't do it. And I don't want them to have the same situation where my body is no longer in a good spot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. And I love working with youth athletes. And we actually are, I have one employee and she's going to be working with the Andover track team this fall to basically go in with the young kids and teach them how to do basic exercises in a weight room, and teach them how to move well and not just move and flail their bodies around, but teach them early these movement patterns and these things that we end up teaching the 30, 40 something year old when it's so far into their running that, I just wish we could have gotten a hold of them earlier. So,
it's like that. It's like the hockey player that is now playing golf and everyone's like, whoa, you're like, you mean, how are you holding the club? I'm like, I'm holding it like I would hold a hockey stick. So I'm thinking that you're dealing with the same thing where once a runner's a runner and we have our bad habits, I totally know I have mine. Yeah. It is one of those moments where how do you convert that bad runner when you're older? And then that young runner is like, well, this is the way I've always run. And they're just so stuck in their mind with that.
Yeah. I mean, going back to that same book that I mentioned, that book Spark, they actually talk about how like a lot of phys ed programs are just not that successful for creating long-term success because, great, you're playing handball for 30 minutes. So the kid got 30 minutes of aerobic exercise, but that doesn't teach them how to go access a gym and be active long-term or how to move well and protect their bodies. So I think for youth and even not even just youth athletes, but even just the youth is like, we're going to go in with this track team and we're going to teach, these are the very basics of like, see all these dumbbells and these equipment and stuff. What can you and should you be doing now? How to squat right, how to move in basic functional movements. Running is just squatting and bounding one leg to the other. So you should have good strength with one leg. And if you're squatting or lunging, what should that look like? And just teaching kids foundational good movement patterns. Youth athletes can absolutely get into a training room and strength train, and that's very, very safe. The priority isn't heavy weights. It's proper mechanics and movement, learning how to do these things and empowering kids to know how to take that in for themselves. I think obviously I'm biased because I'm a trainer too, but my runners, I think the overwhelming thing I tell them is you need to do more than just run. You need to strength train. Or especially for kids is like, I encourage kids to do more than just the same sport over and over. Move your body in different ways.
But the thing is, they go, think about it. Like back in the day, if you had a job and your boss found out that you had a side gig, you'd get like, oh my God, you're not taking this seriously. So a lot of coaches, the second they find out they have another sport, they kind of frown upon that. And so even with an individual, like I'm going to only do CrossFit, I'm only going to do running. People are so focused. So why would, because I mean, I'm all about where I run 3 days a week and I do a shit. Look, sorry. I this is me. Like I don't, like I can say shit. Like, we don't say the F word, but I do a lot of cross training because for me, that's like I'm always go with my cross training. There's not one day I miss, even if it's just like a long walk. A lot of people won't do that.
Yeah. And those are the ones who I see injured the most. The ones who I ran cross country, I ran winter track, I ran track. I've never lifted a weight. I've never moved my body laterally. And that's the hard thing about running is that it happens in a straight line. Even if you play only basketball all year round, at least you're moving forward, back, side, side. You're just training muscles. I see all the time runners who they have so much weakness in the lateral hip muscles because all they do is run forward. And most runners don't love, strength training and doing the extra stuff that keeps them strong. And I'm like, I understand that. I'm not trying to pull you into strength training and make you a bodybuilder. I want to give you what's going to keep you healthy long term. Your bones, your muscles, your tendons have to be strong and resilient to bear the brunt of the sport that you do for a long time. You can get through it till you're mid-20s. I mean, for me, when I started hitting 30 is when I started noticing like a little bit more aches and pains with, running so often.
Well, it's funny because I read Kobe Bryant's book and I think that was one of those moments where it just like clicked with me where he had major ankle injuries. And he's like, as I was healing, I took tap dancing. And I'm like, tap dancing? He's like, to build strength as in with my ankles. That's what I did. And everyone laughed at him. He's like, laugh at me all you want.
Yeah.
I know this was something that was dramatically different for my body. Or when you're watching Dancing with the Stars and all these people, I was an athlete. I've never used any of these muscles in my entire life and I'm hurting every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, our slogan is movement is medicine. So moving your body however you can. I remember when Tim Thomas, when the Bruins won the Stanley Cup, when he was the goalie, I remember in the off season, he talked about how he did Pilates and yoga and he was just totally changing the way he trained.
Yeah.
And then he came out and had his best season he's ever had. And it's like, we don't have to think like brutes, like hockey player, like just think about moving your body in different ways. And that's going to keep you the strongest and the healthiest. Those are the people who I see way less in my office with injuries. I mean, I very rarely get the injuries where they're like, yep, I strength train 2 or 3 days a week. I run, I do, this and that. It's a far smaller amount.
Yeah.
And going back to your question of like, who is the like primary people that I see, like who is like the big population that we've been able to help the most. And again, we've seen brand new runners. I've seen Olympic trial qualifiers. I find that my masters runners, which I think is actually defined by like 35 plus, I think is when they start calling you a masters runner.
Really?
So young.
No, I don't think it's very, all right, so masters.
It's like 35 or 40. It's like 35 or 40. It's very low for what they consider to be a masters runner, which just tells you that the community category,
which
no
cracks
faith.
me up. So just so you know, I'm a senior.
But it's just a good example of how they have no faith in runners being able to run sustainably long in life. So they say, well, this is probably the end of your career here. And I have a number of runners. I have one guy right now who is an amazing marathoner. He was been spending 40 to 50 miles a week for his whole life running, super fast marathons, even into his early 60s. He was told, he's always had some achy knees. He was told, you have bad arthritis, you have got to stop running. And doctors telling him stop running, you shouldn't run. And it's actually really not that well supported by research that running progresses arthritis. Arthritis is progressive as it is. And it took a while. He worked with me for a while, but he wasn't running for a couple months there, but he's back to running 30 to 40 miles a week. We just adapted the way he moves. We've prioritized getting him strong. As you age, your muscles break down faster. So I was like, we need you to get your muscles strong. And I know that seems counterintuitive to an endurance sport, but he's deadlifting 145 pounds. He's squatting. His back pain feels better for the first time in years. I have a similar guy who's about 64 years old. He's had a hip replaced and he was told no running. His surgeon said, I'm okay with running on a joint replacement. And a lot of surgeons are feeling more that way. But he really, 5 years after the hip replacement, hadn't really gotten back to it yet because he just wasn't feeling great. And he's back to running.
You're kind of fearful of like, I just had this major surgery. The doctors are like kind of putting things in my brain and I'm kind of afraid to go out there and see what happens. Yeah.
And there's a lot of doctors that will create that fear. One of the longest conversations I will have with a patient, and again, I think this comes down to like, well, we just spent 30 minutes of our appointment talking about this, but it's helpful to them, is like, can I run through pain? I have pain. Do I stop? And then or I have pain and I just push it too hard, and just having the conversation of, is pain okay? How much pain's okay? And educating them, and how far that goes outside of that quick, yeah, why don't you just stop running, and just putting fear on people. I mean, and I see a lot of pre and postnatal runners as well. I have a specialty in pre and postnatal, and talk about another population where people just put fear into them of, don't lift weights more than 40 pounds. Don't let your heart rate go over 100. And it just creates fear, and it's not really accurate. And
well, even like the woman,
things.
When I ran, it was my second marathon that I ran, and a woman that was pregnant, and we were like keeping pace, and people were, you could hear the people on the sideline just like, oh my God, what is she doing? And I'm like, stop saying that to her.
Yeah, but she might have gone into that pregnancy running multiple marathons, well trained, and she wasn't doing anything different. So yeah, there's a lot of those types of populations I especially love to work with, and I would say older runners, runners with arthritis, or pregnant postnatal women who there's some medical provider along the way has said, you should give up running. That's not healthy. It's just, if your bodies are strong, our bodies can take on running, absolutely, and they can do them long term.
Pandemic happens, March 2020. We are hearing the buzz finally in the United States. I mean, mind you, like in other countries, they're like, oh my God, what's happening here? You are how many years into your business?
No years into my business.
No year. Look at that. Look at that. All right,
I opened my business during the pandemic.
So there we go. So no years into this business. What were you doing when the pandemic started, and what made you start the business, and how was it during the entire time? Because that's the time where gyms were closed. People just started running. Like, I mean, I saw the most people out there running, and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to go out there. Couldn't go to stores and buy. Amazon was like sending sneakers every which way. No one knew what was good or bad for them in regards of what to wear on their feet, on their clothes, nothing. So everything was new for so many people out there that took on running. So talk to us about how it was for you when the pandemic started. What were you doing when the business started? How did you develop it? And then how is it now?
Yeah, so I would actually probably say without the pandemic, I don't know if I would have started the business. More like it. So I honestly probably owe it to the pandemic. But when the pandemic started, I was working at Spalding Rehab, which is a very, very big rehab hospital in Boston. It's part of Mass General Brigham, big hospital entity. I was seeing in the outpatient setting. I was at the Spalding National Running Center, and my caseload was 80 to 90% runners. And when it hit, we also see a lot of neuro patients and like people who like functionally need it for their day-to-day life, physical therapy. And our managers basically came in and said, we need everybody to triage your patients as outpatient PTs. Like we are only going to allow patients to come in who absolutely need physical therapy to like sustain their day. Somebody who just had a knee replacement, someone with a spinal cord injury. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to guess that's all my patients because, like insurance and in hospitals, like they're not telling me that my patient with 5 out of 10 ankle pain who's running 20 miles a week is going to be important. So overnight, basically all of our patients went home. We were deployed to various places around the network. So I actually was deployed to the convention center where they had a surge hospital for coronavirus patients. I'm used to treating tendonitis and knees and hips, and all of a sudden I had to go refresh myself on my cardiopulmonary PT books because we were working with getting people adapting after COVID.
How was that for you? Because I mean, like people at that time, they weren't. So when the convention center was open, it was like people were they were sick. I mean, they were very, very sick. So how was that for you being thrown like, hi, I had physical therapy, you got injured, I'm helping you like, acclimate your body, and now you're thrown into this mix of holy crap, like this is in a war zone.
Yeah, it literally was. I mean, it was a triage, like military style hospital. It certainly puts a lot of perspective on things, even coming back to seeing runners, and even the runners themselves were like, oh God, my ankle must seem like nothing to you. You were just like trying to make sure people weren't dying and could go home to their families. So yeah, it was a pretty crazy experience. And again, I had to brush up on all my cardiopulmonary, we had people on oxygen and we had their vitals and we'd walk with them and we'd have to make sure their vitals didn't completely plummet. It was obviously very new. So, especially at that point, we didn't know what was going on. It was scary. even if you were seeing friends and family socially outside, I immediately became a leper that no one wanted to see me because I was going into this hospital. My husband, when I would come home, I'd go in through the bulkhead, I'd strip down, he'd put my clothes, we'd turn it was just that point of like, we didn't know what we were doing. But it was very fulfilling. It really was fulfilling to do it. It was such a shift in what I had been doing for the previous 4 years. So it was fulfilling.
And how long were you there? How long were you in charge of the triage? Not in charge, but like part of the triage.
We were there for like 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
And then at that point, I think around end of June, we were going back into the outpatient setting at that point. And then as far as where my business was born out of that, there's just an article the other day that, with this not only does this insurance-based setting and these busy clinics affect the patients, but PTs there was a recent article saying there's a bunch of PTs who really don't have a ton of job satisfaction right now. They're coming out of school with really, really high loans. Their pay is really not that great considering the loan debt they're taking out. And, we're seeing like 42 patients a week. It's busy. You're constant. It's draining. You're seeing patients one after the other. And like I said, not maybe getting the greatest care. And I felt a little drained even before the pandemic. And then at times, we were being deployed, we were being called heroes. And then we were finding out, the nurses are getting more pay for hazard pay, but the PTs weren't. And it was just a moment of like, just feeling of disrespect and frustration. But
you're doing tired. Just as much because so I took care of my grandmother till she died at 95 years old. And I remember the PTs were always on the floors. They were always it was like, not that saying that the nurses are not, and nurses are working very hard. They're on the floor too, but you guys are going from room to room to room to room to room. And I never saw a beat where, other than weekends, were the only days that we didn't see at MGH for the elderly, but Monday through Friday, it was this constant flow of just being there twice a day for one particular person. So how is it possible that you guys aren't getting that same kind of pay?
That's a good question. And I actually have a patient who is a nurse who was at the convention center with us. And when we found out that we had both been there, and she was just like, oh my God, we couldn't have got by without physical therapists. Like we were getting every patient out of bed. We were walking with them. We were monitoring their saturation of their oxygen. And I don't know. I mean, it's a problem in our industry. And it was a big reason that pushed me to be like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of my patients not getting the greatest care. I'm tired of us not, being respected enough, or, we're told you have to go get a doctorate and then our pay scale never changed. You need to go get a doctorate level. You need to spend 7 years in school and your pay is the same as when it was a master's,
That doesn't even make any sense.
It doesn't. And I think, people see someone like me and they say, well, you're just, maybe they can see the spinal cord injury PTs they put more value on that than like, well, a lot of the world might say, well, you don't have to run, you could just stop running. So I think even more so with that athlete in that active population, there's just less value put on what we're doing. But again, I go down to the depth of like, that person mental health is better because they're active. That person can play with their kids because their back's not bothering them anymore. So like, what value are we putting on this? We're with patients so much more than that orthopedic doctor is for 15 minutes who says, go see the PT now. And then every week we're with that patient, and I'm even figuring out like, I don't think this is what the doctor said it was, because I'm actually spending an hour once a week or twice a week with that patient. And I don't know. I think one basic reason is probably unions. Nurses have unions and we don't. But it was frustrating. So I think when we got back into the outpatient setting and we got back to day-to-day life, I felt like drained. Do I like what I do still? I'm just kind of, it's just been a long up and down road. And as far as where my business then sort of started coming into fruition is I always maintained personal training on the side. Many PTs work 2 jobs. I worked sometimes in a nursing home on the side, and I always maintained training clients on the side. And I saw a few runners, but just general training clients. And I actually had a colleague who opened her business called the Pilates RX. We consider ourselves sort of sister studios. And she's a certified Pilates instructor. She decided she wanted to pursue this out of network setting where she was going to do one-on-one Pilates and use Pilates in her physical therapy treatment. She opened her business on, I think, like March 10th of 2020. She opened her doors, took this big leap, horrifying leap, and a week later had to close down.
Yeah.
So despite all that, she had been super, super successful and really had found a whole new passion in what she was doing. Cause I think she probably felt drained as well, and kept getting in my ear about, you have this niche too. What if she's like, I have all these runners. I would love to send them to you. Like, are you still seeing patients and clients? And kind of kept getting in my ear about, this is such a better way of treating patients and treating clients, and especially the population you treat. It's so niche and you have such a specialty, and kind of was on me about, there was a space right behind her space in this building, and, maybe I should think about it. And but once February, we started thinking about it in like November of 2020. And by February 1st of 2021, I opened up, and I asked my employer at Spalding to go down to 36. I asked if I could go down to less hours.
Yeah.
They said, we'll let you go down to 36 hours. So I spent the first 2 months opening my business, still working 36 hours at a full-time job, and basically seeing, 8, 9 patients in this space that I was renting as I got started. And
wait. So this is the fun part. This is like where I get really, really so happy about. You are working a full-time, 36 hours. You're working a full-time job. You're working a full-time job. You are a physical therapist. You know your skill. You know what you do extremely well. You are extremely passionate, but now you're a business owner. So you're a business owner, and you are married. You are you have a life outside as little.
We were planning our wedding, in fact.
There we go. Hi.
Yeah.
So we're in a pandemic. You're planning your marriage. You are working full-time job, and as well as you starting a new business, learning. So when I started my business, I was in business school. So my business is 13 years old, from my capstone from my MBA program, 2009, when the world imploded last time, because we implode all the time. An MBA teaches you how to grow a business, not to start a business. I was drowning because I'm like, how do you do all these different things? How does a physical therapist that you've been working for a system for such a long time, how was it for you in regards of learning how to start a business? The passion part is there. The clientele was coming in. The partner was there. But now you have to learn all the aspects of doing a business, because people are hearing you right now and thinking, yeah, she gets to do what she loves to do. But there's still that part where a lot of businesses fail because they don't know all the aspects of the operations, the marketing, the finance. Let's just go down the laundry list and the silos of all the things that you have to do, and you have to learn how to do.
Yeah. And it was kind of like, bittersweet that my colleague who had opened her space had already done it, because she had a lot of systems in place. So when it was like, what are you using for scheduling? And she's like, here's what I use. But at the same, I'm a doer and I like to learn things. So there was a point where it felt like, okay, she's just setting me up with everything. I wasn't like taking it in. Like, well, what's the like you learned all this stuff over months, and I was lucky to have someone be able to fast track it with me. But, I wasn't really learning as much. I was just kind of like having things get set up and starting. So I definitely, it's actually my husband works for a marketing software company in Boston. He works for HubSpot. And so he was like, I can give you some of the software you can use. And he's talking to me. He's like, you can do this and that and market this way. And I'm like, slow down. I was like, 5 seconds ago, I was a healthcare professional. I didn't go to business school. I was like, talk to me like a 5-year-old when you're using all this jargon. And so, I had a handful of people who had followed me kind of, who were always, training clients or PT clients. So I got them in, in the very beginning, it was just, offering, here's a discount if you want to refer a friend, here's a pretty big discount, and trying to get more people in my door. Starting a social media page. Runners love to consume running information. Runners love to read about injuries and all that. So I started just putting things out on social media and starting to write some blogs and put myself out there, and getting out into, going to races, going to run clubs, and just grassroots, just kind of being present in the running community. Maybe wearing a shirt that said the Run RX, and getting into a conversation of, what do you do? Oh, I actually treat runners. And so it was a lot of just the grassroots kind of getting the name out there, and, learning how to use all these softwares, and, learning what search engine optimization was, and all these different things. So it happened very quickly. And I'm still learning, and, I enjoy it. I'm a person who I think what I realize motivates me is getting out what you put into something. And so, the nice thing about what we're doing is I'm getting so much more job satisfaction. My patients are getting better and I'm having a better financial stability. So it's like all win-win. So putting time into that is easier. I probably work more hours now realistically than I was doing in my 40-hour job, but like it's enjoyable, and it's enjoyable to watch it build and grow.
What is the absolute high for you in regards of owning a business, and what's the absolute low of owning your own business? Because during the pandemic, you saw a lot of people just like, I'm over this job, I'm leaving it. I got furloughed, I got laid off. I just graduated from school. I don't know what I want to do. What is the lessons that they can learn from your high, and what is the lesson that they can learn from your low?
The lows, I tell people all the time, I don't know who told me this, but get comfortable being uncomfortable was a very helpful thing I learned. And my lows, I haven't had any really bad lows. I mean, I've steadily grown my business month after month, which has been great. It's more like these microcosm lows of like, wow, July and August, I didn't have a lot of new patients calling me. You get freaked out. People are on vacation. I think over summer after summer, I'll learn that this is just the natural flow. So the lows are just those couple weeks where it's like, oh, I just discharged 2 people. I haven't, and it's just kind of getting the fear out and just wrapping your head around that. Our personal highs were, we actually just moved into a brand new space. We did a whole build out on a nice new space. We went through, another thing I never had to go through was zoning process for a building because they weren't zoned for our purpose. We had to go through a whole lease negotiation and contractors and permitting and all this time spent with an architect, and we built this new space that is beautiful that I couldn't even imagine. It came from our humble beginnings with like the carpeted floors. It was like an office space turned into a gym. So that's been the highest high. And during the process, there was definitely some lows, but I think my biggest advice is just get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like there are going to be times, and I've heard that from people who have absolutely very successful businesses that have been around forever, is that you're never going to not be a little uncomfortable sometimes. That's just going to be natural.
That's like one of the things where I remember when I was younger, I was in the media, and Oprah Winfrey was being lectured by her boyfriend Stedman. Like, she would make lunch every single day. And he's like, because you're Oprah, you don't have to make lunch. And she's like, I go, but how long will I be Oprah? So I'm going to make my lunch. And I was like, that's like, I go from a person at that stature, was like, that's a great lesson for anyone to learn. Couple more questions. The industry that we're living in right now, everyone, I mean, like we go through these cycles of like fitness, we have like cycles of insurance, we have a cycle of like healthcare. There's so much going into this. What should we be aware of for the future? I mean, like, it's not even just, we saw the imbalance of food during the pandemic. I mean, during the hiatus of the pandemic, I mean, the photos of people in line in Texas trying to wait for food. There's so much disparity in regards of people just taking care of their health. But we need this. I mean, we're living longer. What do you think your industry should do in regards of getting people to start thinking smarter, faster, longer, earlier?
Yeah.
Very loaded question. I'm so sorry, but I love loaded questions.
Well, and I'm just going to like pump the tires of the sort of the type of setting that we're in. And again, I mean, I think again, in mental health and in therapy, mental health therapy is also shifted to this like out of network care. And I remember being very afraid of it at first, thinking like, who's going to pay when their insurance could? But I think people are just putting much more priority on their physical health and their fitness and their mental health, as they should. And so I think you're seeing more and more people just say, this is important to me, especially as I get older, taking care of my body and being healthy and being preventative. And I hope that our health field can be more preventative. I hope that our insurances can recognize prevention and the importance of it. I would love to have a scenario where like I didn't have to, the insurance would reimburse me what we should be reimbursed, and patients would be able to get that 1 hour that they really need and not be herded in like cattle. So I've certainly seen in our practice that, we're certainly not the only ones doing what we're doing. You're seeing more and more holistic wellness, out of network kind of combined medical performance fitness type facilities popping up. You're seeing a lot of them kind of finding niches, that what is this population people want? I consume this, I consume that. I love golf. The golf is what drives me. It's what keeps me happy. And, so I don't want to go see, again, the Joe Schmo who never has picked up a golf club. I want to talk to the person who knows me and what I need and what my body needs. So as far as our kind of health and fitness world, I like to think that we could see the insurance providers and the healthcare system recognize that a little bit more. And if they're not, hopefully consumers realize that there are other options. And, in the end, even though maybe it's a little scary, that hopefully it does pay off for your health and fitness in the long term.
What keeps you happy? Because I mean, you spend so much time taking care of others, and seeing their pain points. And you just said, I go, what is that thing that now keeps you happy? Because I don't know if you still play basketball or just for fun, but what is it that kept you happy, not only during like the now, but at the start of the pandemic, as you were building this business? We are working 10 zillion hours on our own businesses. And you're right, we work more on our own businesses than we would ever for anybody else. So what is that moment of happiness for you?
I like to be able to be active, obviously still. Before the pandemic, I was still, going and playing in basketball leagues in the city. I like to continue running. I like to be around my dog. I like to be around my friends and my family. And a big part of wanting to start and grow my business is, I've said this to my colleague before. I was like, even if this were to take off and become so successful, and you'd say you can make all this money and work all these hours, I don't want it. I was like, I wanted to create a life where I can live comfortably, but also enjoy time with my friends and my family, and not have work be a stressor for me. So yeah, being around my dog, going for a run, being around my friends and family, that's pretty much the big thing.
What does your family think of you owning a business? Because your dad's the one that started the running with your grandfather.
Yeah.
And it's like a whole entire trajectory of where you are right now. When you went to school, I'm sure that this was not in anyone's mind to own, like Gabby was going to own her own business. So
No.
What do they think now?
They're very excited. I was the first one in my family to go to college. And then, they saw how much debt I was saddled with and how much it was hard to pay it all off. And I think they were a little shocked when I told them, because it happened very fast, and they were so excited, and they're excited to see it. I just hired my first full-time employee, and I've got, this brand new awesome space. And I think when I first told my family, they were like, they didn't quite see, my friends and family, like where this was going to go. It's scary, and I remember when we first launched our website, because I paid a website person to do it. I decided this is not one of those things I could just figure out myself. And they're like, "Wow, this is very professional." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, we're going all in here." So they're very excited. And from the very beginning, my husband was so supportive. Even before I ever thought about opening a business, he's like, "Why don't you open up your own business? You could absolutely do that. You should. You're good at what you do. You're smart."
HubSpot people kind of do that. That's kind of like the thing, like just try to get your own business going.
Yeah, why don't you just start your own business like it's nothing? So yeah, I remember those days of being like, should we do this? We're paying for a wedding in a few months. This is a little scary. I have student loans. I was in the loan forgiveness program, so I bailed on getting that non-for-profit loan forgiveness after 10 years. There's just a lot of decisions that were.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's like, as a medical person, you should have gotten
that. And that was
Oh.
where I was going. I had been there for a little over 3 years at that location, and was, due to be forgiven of my loans in 7 years. And so that was a massive weight of like, oh, is this smart? Should I stick around? But my happiness I didn't even realize that I wasn't that happy before until I was doing what I'm doing now. And so I was like, we're gonna figure it out. We'll figure it out. And but yeah, so my friends and family are very, very excited, but I also think they weren't super surprised.
I love it. Oh my God, this is like so wonderful. So I told Gabby how I ran into her. So usually my interns find someone, or I see someone in the news, and I go, you know what? If you have a small business, I'm having you on, because my biggest thing is, as a media person, we would, like, back in the day, we would have you on for a long period of time to hear your story, to hear your words. And nowadays, you're on for 30 seconds. We'll sit there and take a couple of sound bites, or it's a political year, and a politician will end up in your spot. So for me, I'm like, I go, when the pandemic happened and my former colleagues were talking about how small businesses are dead, I'm like, well, that's literally impossible, especially because like they're growing even more leaps and bounds. And I wanted to make sure that you guys had a voice, but it wasn't just about the business. It's about the chunks. I put it in 3 chunks as in, who are you? Because like, I need to understand how this business came about. And you just like talked about your grandfather straight through. Like now we get it. We get you because we get like where you've come from, but also just the passion of what you believe in is so important. And you're the expert. I could go to any academic and sit there and ask them about this stuff, but you're doing this every single day. You're living, breathing, eating this. And so why would I want to go somewhere else? And so I try to tell a lot of people, like, the best experts in the world are small businesses that are in our community. The people that you see every single day that you're not even thinking, they're the individuals that they know it, they love it, they breathe it, they are passionate about it, and they want to make sure that you're just as passionate about it. So I was happy where I was in the city, hardly ever in the city. I live in Marblehead. I went to Marathon Sports just to get like a different water bottle. And I was saying to him, like, where I'm running Chicago Marathon. So I'm running Chicago Marathon in October. And then he goes, yeah, you should go and you should meet this woman, Gabby. And like, I go, huh? And he was like, so like, when I tell you he did your pitch well, I'm like, I love it when you're so sticky that someone else can be your salesperson. So it was like so awesome. I went on your website and I'm like, I go, well, I'm in Marblehead, she's in Cambridge. But I just like kept on looking at your website and it is very nice. It's very clean website. And I was like, I need to know more about you for so many people. Because I'm part of North Shore Striders. Like, I mean, everyone in my like running group, they're like, I mean, I'm 53. They're like in their 60s up. And I'm telling you, their pace is legit. There's one of our women, she's in her 70s. She's doing a 100-mile marathon. I'm like, why? Like,
I know.
God, why? But she is like every Sunday morning we go out and she's on fire. I can't believe, I mean, I'm like always just watching her and her stride is just so amazing. And I'm like, I could see 100 miles and she's not even sweating it at all. But it's so wonderful to see all these different shaped people doing it and they do it. And they're just like, I'm the happiest when I get to be with my other runners, or I'm the happiest just being outside, just being out there, just doing the thing. So I was so happy to hear about you. I was so happy to hear what you do. I mean, like, I'm psyched for you. I'm so psyched for you. I mean,
Thank you.
Well, I support small businesses no matter where you are, but I'm more excited about people that discover how amazing they are and what they can offer to a greater audience just because you took a risk. So hey, you took a risk. So I'm super excited.
Thank you.
I'm so happy with the fact that you gave me time. I'm so happy with the fact that you educated us, which is, I think that's one of the biggest things that people don't understand, the longevity of runners. They just assume once there's a certain point in my life that once I'm done arthritis. So you just gave us so much information of what people should be aware of, insurance, longevity, in regards of like, how do you sit there and like focus on your kids? I mean, so much. This is not the last time I will talk to you because I feel that there's a lot of different things that are happening in the news, that are happening in the world that I can bring you guys back together and just, because people need to hear Gabby. They need to hear more of Gabby. But for now, I am going to end it by saying, we always end the conversation with the same way. If you had a personal ask and a professional ask of anyone that's listening to you right now, what would it be? We ask for our businesses all the time, but we never ask for ourselves. So I always say it's a perfect opportunity to hear both. 2 answers, please.
All right. And you walked me through what I should ask. And for my personal ask, which is really just a question, and it's kind of related to my personal life and my running, is how do I get my dog to run with me on a leash and not take me through high intensity intervals of total stop to full sprint? So if there's any vets out there or dog trainers or anyone that has any specific intel on that would be great. And I guess, I don't know, my business ask, I think, the big reason, as I mentioned, that I wanted to start this business was having that great work-life balance. And I recognized in the first, we're going on a little over a year and a half now, that I recognize that work-life balance doesn't come in the first, few years of a business, in the first few stages. So I knew that I'd have to put the time in and just grind, but how people do with separating, that work life, separating on Friday, I turn off and I shut down and I'm around my family, my friends, and I'm not thinking about work. So being able to devote yourself to it, but also be able to make the time for why you did it in the first place. So if anyone has any tips on that, I'd happily take it.
Just so you know, there's no such thing as work-life balance. FYI. No, you know what? One thing will not, I mean, like, if you shut down on Friday and someone leaves you a message, you're not going to see it till Monday. I mean, So
Yeah.
the work-life balance is something will suffer, and it's not a horrible suffer, but something will suffer when you're focusing on another thing. I mean, because
Yeah.
you can't sneeze and open your eyes at the same time. Tried it. It
Yeah.
doesn't work. The best way, that's the best way I can describe work-life balance. I mean, because insurance companies have a list of how many times a car accident happens when someone tries to like sneeze, because that's what happens. You
Yeah.
can't do it. So you can't do it. And just know that there's just one you. Yay for your full-time employee. So that's a good thing. Very good
Yeah.
thing. So
Yeah.
I love that. And the dog one is a good one, because I see that every day here in
Yeah.
town, where I mean, yeah, that's a hard
I
one.
had that asked of me early on in my business. I think I had, just had posted a video of me running with my dog, and the question, someone asking my professional opinion, like, how do you get your dog to run with you? And I'm like, ooh, that's a little bit different from what I do. I was like, if
Wait,
you
what
could
kind of
find
dog
that
do you
answer
have?
for me, well, she's a golden doodle.
She should be a runner. I have a friend that
Oh,
has.
she runs. It's
Okay.
just about how do I get her to steadily run and not come to a complete halt and then sprint and come to a complete halt and sprint. I guess I just need to utilize her for my interval training and just leave it at that.
All right. So I have a personal one. So I'm running Chicago, and I just got into New York. So I'm running Chicago on October 6th, or October 9th.
It's like a month apart, right?
3.5 weeks apart.
Yeah.
So for us crazy people out there, what would you say?
For just how to tackle, have you done 2 back-to-back marathons before?
No.
Like,
We discussed this at the beginning, where we do things because they're
Yeah.
crazy and they're there.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about that is that by the time that New York comes around, the hay is already in the barn. You get to take a couple weeks off, maybe just
I love your saying.
shake out your legs. Yeah. The hay's in the barn, your training is done. You're not going to go out and get much more in those 3.5 weeks. So, know that you're mentally prepared, and, just take care of your body in that little gap and get ready to get to the next start line.
I love it. This is where, again, the athlete will do crazy things. A regular doctor will say, don't do anything.
Yeah.
And then we go out and do something. So I love that. The thing is, I do love that you understand who you're working with, because a lot of individuals that go into physical therapists, it's easy to say, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And I'm like, if you're in physical therapy, have you ever played sports? Because that's one of the things where I love that you said it. I love that you exist. I mean, I really love that you exist.
Thank you.
I love how you're doing. Well, you're doing it differently, and I've never heard of how you're doing it. Reading through like literally, I'm telling people, like, you have to go on her website to see how she does it. It's just so different. It's so smart. It's so smart, and I think that there needs to be more of you. There needs to be more partnerships of you, but more people need to start thinking differently in regards of how they're seeing physical therapists. Because I think for many years, you've been a nice to have, not a need to have. So
yeah, well, and I live north of Boston, so hopefully down the road there's a Run RX North that's more easily accessible to you in Marblehead.
No, I think that's like, I mean, if not, I mean, like, we need to sit there and get you here to do clinics, because
absolutely.
there's too many runners. There's so many
Yeah.
runners in the North Shore that clinics. I always tell people, pop-ups, just if the clothes companies can do pop-ups, you should be able to do pop-up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's lots of good races up there on the North Shore. Up in You Can Run does a lot of great.
I'm doing Wicked. I'm doing Wicked.
Yeah.
Yep,
yeah. One of my clients is doing that one as well. So yeah, I gotta just venture up that way. I do recovery tents and a lot of road races, so I just gotta venture up north and do one up there.
If you ever want to, I can fill a room for you. That I can do.
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Yay. Gabby, thank you so very much I literally took so much more of your time, but thank you so very much.
No problem.
You have been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jodi.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Have a good one.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Coming up into that side plank, pressing those hips up nice and high, and I'm thinking about pulling that weight up and rotating down. Pelvis shouldn't rock or wobble or move at all. It should stay perpendicular to the floor. Your torso can move and rotate a bit. Just don't let your pelvis come along with it.